given, I mean, you look like we were talking about, you've seen 160 bip spread on the 10-year in the past 6 months. Well, from the time you get awarded a deal, that doesn't mean you've got the deal and you're standing still.
Episode 17 of the Deal Ranch. Kyle Edney, Marlboro Development. So you're the executive vice president here. We're in your office in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Super nice, right downtown. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming on the show.
Matt. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Absolutely. So thanks to Sandy Davis. She obviously orchestrated this via referral. So you guys are developing a spec building, Ascot Valley, in Horry County, and Sandy obviously facilitated that, right? Mm-hmm. And we can talk about that later, but I appreciate her setting this up. But if you want to give an intro on yourself and a brief intro on the company, that'd be great.
Sure. As you said, I'm the executive vice president here with Marlboro Development Team. I lead our upstate South Carolina development efforts, and we've got two satellite coverage in North Carolina and Georgia. What's a little bit unique about Marlboro Development, I mean, we function as a for-profit subsidiary of Marlboro, or what is now MPD Electric Cooperative. So you've rewind back 6 years. When we joined the company, our parent company was Marlboro Electric Cooperative, which is a cooperative that serves Marlboro and Dillon counties. A lot of people ask us where did the name Marlboro come from, and that's where it originated. But since that time, our parent company has merged with the neighboring cooperative, PD Electric Cooperative, to form MPD Electric, which is led by William Fleming, who's our CEO, both of MPD and Marlboro Development, as well as our board of directors.
Yeah, it's really unique, and I've got a bunch of different questions in regards to that, too. It's the one thing that stands out right away, right? It's a huge development company. You guys have done a lot of really impactful deals and different type of ownership than typically what you're used to seeing, obviously.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So as far as just a brief overview of Marlboro, services, market, asset class, you guys do build-to-suit, redevelopment, spec building. Like, can you give a brief little overview there?
Sure. So we're headquartered in Florence and Bennettsville, so that's our back office. But the front-end development side is here in the upstate, here in Spartanburg at our office. We focus predominantly in the industrial sector in the southeastern United States. We also travel more on the retail side with specific clients that have taken us to 20 states, from New York, Miami, Texas, California, and everywhere in between.
Wow. So before we bring it to modern day, we can walk through your career, because I bet all those relationships and learnings kind of helped quite a bit. So similar to Sandy, right, you started, or she didn't start there, but for you started in economic development. So Henderson County?
That's right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. How did that, to me, maybe I wasn't really exposed to real estate right out of college, but like, how did that role come to you? What interested you about it? Like, what was the first job like?
Well, it really started, so whenever I was in college, I was a business major, and I interned at the Chamber of Commerce in Henderson County, which at the time housed the Economic Development Organization. It was a Committee of 100.
Sure.
And kind of understood and learned a little bit about it through the internship. And the gentleman that ran that organization, Scott Hamilton, after college, I did some short-term contract work with the Chamber, and then I moved to Chicago. Thought I was destined to live in a big city. The winters proved me wrong on that. So I came back south, and then just coincidentally, as I was moving back, Scott had reached out about this opportunity with his organization. And so that was my introduction into the public sector. And so I went to work in the community, and I'm from that area. I'm actually from Saluda, North Carolina. So I went to high school in Henderson County and went to work for the organization that was initially very close to where I grew up.
Very cool. So what was the stint in Chicago for? A different job, or
I went up just after college and expected to live in a big city. You know, it's funny. You know, my dad worked for a bank in Hendersonville for 30 years and had the same job, same company. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was life. And so whenever I got out of college, I decided I was going to move to Chicago. My dad had told me, look, if you're ever going to get ahead, you got to be flexible. You got to be ready to go. And so I told him I was moving to Chicago. He said, that's a horrible idea. but
Thanks, Dad.
that was just a, post college, opportunity. But at the end of the day, I always wanted to be where I am now, down south.
Sure. So business development was that first role, obviously. Mm-hmm. I've always been curious if economic development for every county has similar priorities, right? Bring in new business, and a lot of times that's build new industrial buildings to lure in jobs, right? But I was always curious how different they are from county to county, if there are different priorities. So like for you and your business development role, what were, like in that first role, what was your task? What were your responsibilities? Well, I mean, anybody that's been in the public sector in a local economic development role in a small shop, I think you wear every hat. Yeah.
And it was, everything from, website development, collateral material development. There's a real estate component. But it was anything and everything that needed to be done. And initially, economic development, as you said, you're trying to sell a community and the attributes of that community. And Henderson County is a great place to live. The challenges there are usually product, topography, developability of sites, and competing uses for that product, because it's such a great place for great industrial properties. Also a great place to do retail or multifamily. So in Henderson County, we working with Scott and the team, I did pretty much whatever he asked me to do, but he gave me a great opportunity to learn and encouraged me to develop professionally with, economic development. There's an economic development institute administered through the University of Oklahoma. So going through that program and really, helped me learn. But what I did a lot of is listen. I mean, whenever I first got into the business, I was traveling with a gentleman that worked for, Duke Energy now. And he had been around for a long time and just had a great reputation, had a great career, and lamenting how, just overwhelming it was out of the gate. And he said, it's often better to be thought a fool and remain silent than to speak and remove all doubt. And I kind of took that to heart. So it was a lot of learning and listening early in my career.
Wow. A lot of people after school, certainly myself included, but it's not the job you're going to do forever. But for you, right, you've kind of been in this sector, right? What kept you interested? So a couple years in, 2-3 years in, then you go to Florence. What prompted the Florence? Another very cool market, historic market, and now growth market. But what prompted that? But also, what made you want to not do something else? Like what kind of got you out of bed? What kept you interested after those?
Well, I mean, I genuinely loved local economic development, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make a difference. You're a facilitator between all the different variables. It's a lot like real estate. Every company has different priorities on their decision making, and your job is to try to solve those and in the most positive way possible present your community. So I really enjoyed the local level simply because of the ultimate goals that you have. And in Henderson County, I knew a lot about the community, but you're trying to impact people that you live and work around. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's public sector economic development. But the opportunity in Florence came, I was just recruited down there and got a call and had spent my entire life from Western North Carolina to Myrtle Beach every year, been through Florence a lot, but didn't know a lot about the community. And so I worked for Joe King, spent a lot of time with him before I moved down there, but worked for that organization. And it was a good opportunity for me to advance kind of to the next level. And, it was different for me because I hadn't worked in the state. I didn't know anyone in Florence, didn't know the community. So it was a lot different than where I was. But it was a challenge and it was a great opportunity. And if you fast forward to today, a lot of why and how things have happened to get to today started in Florence.
In what regard do you think?
Well, just the relationship. So whenever I was in Florence, one of our key economic development allies was PD Electric Cooperative. And I worked very closely with the co-op and specifically with William Fleming, who is our CEO.
That's right.
And that's where that relationship started. And, the co-op had a lot of foresight on the product development side, and Florence was just it's very different geographically, but also for me, coming from some of the challenges in Western North Carolina to a place where there's an abundance of land, it's all flat, and for me, I won't say the word cheap, but it was inexpensive in comparison, and
that's right.
So it's like, wow, it was just a new world, but. PD Electric, we worked very closely. They were a key ally for us with the Economic Development Partnership and a lot of successes. I mean, we had a really good run there, and a lot of that was done in their service territory.
Interesting. So as you progress, you spent some time in Florence, and then you went to what seemed like an aggregate, or they serviced an aggregate of counties, right? So Advantage West. What was the bulk of that, and it's no longer operating?
Yeah, that organization is no longer in existence, but it was one of the 7 regional economic development partnerships throughout the state of North Carolina, and it covered everything, basically Charlotte West. It was the 23 westernmost counties, and how that happened. So the gentleman I worked for in Henderson County, Scott Hamilton, he had progressed to where he was the CEO of Advantage West, and so I'd been in Florence 3-4 years. And the opportunity came to work with him again. It was, quote unquote, going home, and so I went back to that organization.
Wow, bringing it all to more modern day, and I've got a bunch of questions in regards to what you guys do now. But you did a pretty impactful, I assume, 6-7 years at Agricel, which would have been your first private or really first development job. Obviously.
That's correct.
What made that jump interesting after being in just this public sector, and then what was the first role there?
Well, I don't want to say that I had always saw a path to transition to the private sector, but it was always something that you consider, and you consider different opportunities at different times. And there was a gentleman at Agricel named Todd Toman, who I had gotten to know through economic development,
of course, and
he had reached out to me and told me what their intent was, what they wanted to do, because they're based in Illinois. They're a great company. They're great people. I mean, our departure from there was not anything negative. They're full of really good people, and they're a well-run organization. But he had approached me about what they wanted to do. They wanted to grow into the Southeast. They wanted to open an office, and they had very limited. They had done a little bit of work in the Carolinas. They had a spec building in the central part of the state that they had built right as the recession hit. But, he presented it to me, and being honest with you, I wasn't necessarily interested at first, but he was very persistent.
Love it.
And I ended up getting to meet a lot of the leadership and the folks in Illinois, and they were good people. And so the timing was just right. It was also an opportunity for me. I mean, their entry into this market was not acquiring a portfolio or making a long-term land play or taking down land. It was really through people, and they had a proven model about how they wanted to do things, and my job was to figure out how to implement that here. But at the time, I wasn't married, I didn't have children, and so it allowed me the freedom and flexibility to go. I mean, literally, it was 60,000 miles a year on a car go between the Carolinas to try to build a foundation for them.
And what does that mean specifically? Their scale or their goal was through people as opposed to through acquisition.
Well, my job was to, I had an understanding of who they were and how they did things and where they wanted to be and what type of deals they wanted to do. And it was my job to figure out how to implement that in this market.
Yeah, building from scratch.
That's right.
Market. So one of the things on the website or somewhere in your bio, it says you transformed a region from, I think they had maybe $2 million invested in that region or market into $100 million. So that was this region at Agricel that's referring to?
It was the Southeast. So I opened their first.
So that's a huge
satellite office, and it was a grind. I mean, it really was, and we were very successful, and give them a lot of credit because they figured out how to operate in this market. But it was a long grind, and for the first 5 years of that 7, I was by myself. I mean, I had support from their corporate office in Illinois, but as we grew, it afforded us opportunities to add people. And Brian Nash, my partner, my colleague, I'd known Brian. Brian actually worked for a developer based here in Spartanburg whenever I was in the public sector.
Oh, neat.
And then the roles reversed. So I was in the private sector and he was in the public sector here in Spartanburg. And that's a theme that with our team, whether it be Brian or myself or Julie, we've all worked on a local economic development within a community. I mean, Julie was in Hickory for 24 years with a great program in Catawba County with Scott Millar. Brian had been in the public sector. Even Tom Suit has public sector experience. And so with our work now with a lot of economic development organizations, it's something that we understand. It's seats that we've been in, and I think that's important. But I'm sorry, I think I'm getting away from you.
No, I think we're right on track. Okay, so after you, in some way, shape, or form, obviously, you significantly develop your skills or harness your craft in building from scratch, right? Which certainly comes to help here when you build this branch. But when you leave Agricel, did the four of you? Oh, scratch that. So Marlboro Development started in 2011, but you guys didn't branch here till 2018. And did four of you leave Agricel at the same time to start this?
We did. So MDT preceded us, and we did not start MDT. MDT was formed with a vision that William and the board of directors had to initially foster economic development within their service territory with product development, with real estate. Wow. So they had done work previously, the Wyman Gordon project in Dillon. That was at a project that MDT was a part of, the New Inland Port Terminal in Dillon. So MDT had been around, and the vision for MDT rests with William and our board of directors. Whenever we were brought on, it was to scale it and to expand it. That's why we're here in the upstate. So there was a vision that our leadership had to grow MDT beyond just Dillon and Marlboro counties, and that's what we're doing. But yes, to your question, when we left Agricel, William and MDT offered all of us the opportunity to leave. It wasn't an individual, awesome. And then the individual said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And that's, our team. We have such a great team, and we've been through a lot together, and I think it's very rare. Our team was not haphazardly put together. And, like Brian, I wanted to work with Brian for 5 years before it became a reality. And, our pact, and Bill's part of this too, and everybody on our team, is that if we have any control or say in our destiny for our careers, we're gonna do it together professionally. And so whenever the MBT opportunity presented itself, it was not presented to one person. It was, and William's a very, very intelligent man, and the way that he did it, everyone made their own decision individually, and then the consensus was yes, and so that's when the transition was made. Interesting. Package deal. Everyone voted to be on this collective team. Yeah, well, and let me back up a little bit from that too, because the relationship with MDT was not between William and I from 10 years ago. We had already been working with, so William had developed a spec building in Marion County that they helped facilitate a tenant for, and so we bought it whenever I was with my previous group, and upfit and leased that spec building to them. And then that grew into, we were working in partnership with William on multiple projects. So we were already somewhat working together. I think William just made the decision that he would rather us work for him versus with him. He's a smart man. So what was the initial role for you here then? Were you, obviously in leadership for this office, but you come here, you have this team of 4, I believe it was initially. Kind of similar journey to Agricel, where you're starting from scratch again, right? Was it just to scale or to find deals in this just, couple 100-mile region, or what was the initial kind of hypothesis of, we're going to build this team here in Spartanburg? What's the territory or goal to develop deals? Well, I think it's been consistent where our activity, if you look at over the past 6 years where we've done development deals, that has predominantly still been in the Southeast. Now, the retail side has significantly expanded. And even today, we're in markets that we weren't in 6 years ago geographically. But the focus, I think, still remains here in South Carolina. I mean, even fast forward to the growth in coverage. I mean, we've done that not specific to we want to be in this state at this time. It's when opportunities is also people. I mean, at the end of the day, it's people. We've got such, like I said, such a great team and such a great dynamic with every member of our team that people are the most important thing.
Of course. This episode of The Deal Ranch is brought to you by Reed's Jewelers. Reed's has been in business for 77 years. Since 1946, they have been devoted to customer service and quality. Visit Reed's for a large selection of fine Swiss timepieces from Omega, IWC, Breitling, Grand Seiko, and Tag Heuer. With fast free shipping and 24-hour customer service, Reed's is the perfect gift for this holiday season and any moment you want to remember. Find a Reed's store near you or shop online at reeds.com. That's REEDS.com, or click the link in the show notes. So breaking down the four, kind of how I see it, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of like your four lines of service. So build to suit, redevelopment, sale, leaseback, and spec. Is that the main? Okay. So for build to suit, how are these deals coming to you guys? Is this someone that is, which way does the business development flow? Are you reaching out to companies that, is it being facilitated through economic development where some company is saying, hey, Sandy, we need a building built here, and then Sandy's reaching out to you? Or is it vice versa where they're reaching out directly to you? Or are you prospecting into these? Like, what is the origination of the build-to-suit deals?
All of the above.
Okay.
We still do a lot of work. Like Sandy, for example, we had done 2 build-to-suits down there prior to this spec opportunity. So, at the end of the day, on the economic development side, we want to be a value-added partner, and we want to be able to help. Like I said, we've all been on our development side, been in the seats that a lot of these local economic developers are. And so we understand, we have a singular role to play. That's what's really cool about what we do now, is because we still get to work in that sphere. We're a minor part of the total deal and all the things, but we've got a singular role to play, but we still get to be a part of that. And that's what's really, really exciting for us. But we also work with brokers. We work with site selectors. We work with economic development folks. We've been doing this now long enough where relationships with people that we've worked with, years and years ago, they're with new companies and there are new opportunities. So it's a broad spectrum. We work with anything that's going to help facilitate opportunities, or anyone.
So breaking down that service exactly, right? So build to suit. Someone's coming to you. Is it a fee-based build, or are you guys like buying the land and leasing it back? Like, how does the deal itself function? In that I want, hey, Kyle, can MDT build us this building that we need? Our company's coming in here. I'm sure there's different ways to structure
We've done a few what I'll call fee development deals, but the majority of these are with companies that have no interest in ownership in the real estate, and they're looking for a turnkey solution. So we would be the development partner to serve in basically start to finish, from procurement of the land, due diligence, all the other ancillary things, design, construction, and then post-construction tenant administration. It's a turnkey. Most things that we do now, we oftentimes don't get into. We do a lot of work with manufacturers, so we usually stay out of the process distribution or any kind of personal property. But real property, it's for the most part a turnkey deal. And build to suit has been. If you go back 6 years, and you come out of 2011 to today, second gen space is gone. Functional second gen space is gone, and so spec is you've seen an explosion in spec in the Southeast over the past number of years, but also on the build to suit side. Companies that can't fit within 4 walls of a spec and can't find existing space that's suitable, those are the companies that we're oftentimes working with, and for manufacturers at least, it's harder for them to fit within a box. Yeah,
that's a good point. And then also probably good to highlight, like you guys, I think, are national preferred developer for Harbor Freight. So you have these brands, quality brands that you guys are doing, probably built to suit for everywhere, right? So then moving on to the redevelopment. So focusing on, let's say, a distressed property or vacant property, and we were chatting about one before this, but how does that deal function then? Are you taking, or is a broker coming to you and saying, hey, Kyle, there's this building in our county that's vacant or distressed. There's no one in it, no one planning to go in it. Are you looking at that deal as a build to suit opportunity where you have a specific client lined up of where you're going to retrofit it for that person, or are you approaching it more as a spec deal? That's what I wondered.
For our spec, it's predominantly been new construction.
Okay.
We have not done a lot of acquisitions of vacant property. We've done several redevelopments over the last few years, but it's been with a tenant in tow that we can work together to understand what their requirements are and then upfit that building to their specifications. So we would be, again, turnkey in the sense that we're acquiring the real estate on their behalf, entering into a long-term lease, and then performing necessary improvements for them to make it suitable for them to occupy.
Interesting. Okay. And then on the sale leaseback, you were saying no existing inventory, just only new construction is what your model for that fits? Like, do you buy any existing building?
We have, yeah,
okay.
yeah,
okay.
and we've done a couple of those. Well, again, that hasn't been a huge part of the last 6 years, just because, for a lot of reasons, and the market. But we have done a couple sell leasebacks. That's something that we're certainly interested in. We're starting to see a little bit more of that now in this market and particularly in this capital markets environment. But that hasn't been a huge part. I mean, if you look at the growth of our portfolio for the past 6 years, has been a lot of build to suit.
Yeah.
And then the spec program is continuing to grow and evolve.
That's what I want to talk about now, because it's the most interesting part to me. Feel free to talk as much about it as you want. Okay. So when I think of spec, and obviously not being in the industrial space, you obviously understand that there's a component of risk in that is different than another deal. But before we kind of dive into the underwriting or how you even forecast that amount of vacancy or mitigate that risk in your deal, how are you finding areas that you're like, hey, this area, Horry County, doesn't have enough industrial space as they need? I'm sure there are a lot of counties like that, but how do you know which ones you're like, okay, this is supported by job growth that we need, this is supported by income that we need, housing, like, because there's so many variables. How do you look at a county and say, hey, we want to go to Horry County, we want to go to New Hanover County, whatever it may be? Where does that start for, hey, we want to build spec here?
Well, it usually starts, we like to work with really solid economic development organizations. So that's part of the equation. But as far as the community itself, what we ultimately look at, we're not the 500,000 or 1 million square foot box guys.
Yep.
If you've done any research on us, you'll see that most of our specs are not done, even in places where we live, like here in the upstate. There is a huge influx of space in the major tier 1 markets here in the southeast. And so our model has been to do those in communities where you've got all the ingredients for success, but they're lacking product. And a lot of these economic development organizations do a great job of tracking where they're missing opportunities. So that's really the start is, with our model and what our pro forma is, which is usually, 100 to 150, 125,000 square feet. We're not really doing anything smaller than that and haven't, just really because of the economics of how you make those deals pencil. But, that's where it starts. And so if we can quantify that there are opportunities being missed purely from a real estate standpoint, and a lot of communities do a very good job of quantifying that, that's where it really begins. And then if that part checks, then obviously you're solving for real estate, but then we're also solving for the market. This model that we have from an underwriting standpoint, we can peg, even in this environment, we can peg the vertical costs. The vertical costs from 18 to now have doubled.
Yeah.
The vertical piece. So you're solving for the site. But the next step is then to understand, does it make sense economically? Because at the end of the day, this is still an economics play. And we've got to be competitive with neighboring communities, neighboring states. It's the overall market to make these deals work. So that'll be the analysis that we'll run internally. We'll also consult with others. And then if all those things make sense, then I think you've got the basis of, hey, here we go. And as much as we'd love to do, one in every county in the Southeast, we've got to be somewhat strategic in that. And we've had a great program here in South Carolina. Knock on wood, we haven't had, we've only got one vacant now that's in Florence, and we've got some really good things happening there that hopefully we'll be able to get something done in the very near future. But we haven't had a building sit vacant, and it's what we tell communities. It's not a promise. It's not a commitment. We can't make those commitments because there are things we can't control. But, if a community can quantify the need and we can quantify that we can fill that need in an economic way, then you've got the right recipe. And so we haven't had anything sit for more than 6 months, which is the route we would like to continue.
Yeah.
And that has to do with where we elect to do these. But we are expanding that program. I can't get into specifics because they're not public yet, but geographically, with our office in North Carolina, there we've got something going there, and then also into new markets. So we're always going to be, a South Carolina based company focused on South Carolina, but geographically we're expanding out, particularly on the spec program.
So after you go through that, and obviously this process, like you just outlined there, very heavily dependent on quality relationships with economic development counties and counterparts, and then getting good data. And once you guys get the feeling and it pencils out, at least initially, what is then the next step? Like how I decide, and let's say we locate a tract of land, right, in Horry County that we want to build a spec on. You go back and forth with the county, decide on it, go through initial procurement. What is the process? Like, when do you expect tenants to be in there? Like, how is that it's 24 months from, like, or maybe let's say from construction. Hey, we got the land, everything's zoned, we're going to start building. Like, how does that work in your pro forma? Like, how much vacancy, and then what is the marketing plan of getting a new tenant in? Hey, Sandy, we've got a deal for you. We're going to build this. What is that go-to-market strategy for getting a business?
So we're going to market as soon as it's public. Okay. So we've got a runway. Whenever you factor in everything that goes into, and we procure these out all the way through. So it's a competitive procurement of construction services. So by the time you factor in acquisition, design, due diligence, and then get to the point where we've procured and awarded, you've got a anywhere from 4 to 6 months runway before you're even turning dirt. And then,
nice.
8-9 month construction duration. So you've baked in from the time we start, and we work cooperatively. We're developing collateral. We're doing, working with economic development folks, whether it be, call trips, visits with whomever. We're present for all that. These are not situations where we say, hey, we've solved the real estate, go find a tenant. We work hand in glove with our local economic development organizations where we're doing these. And it works because, it to me, it's the perfect partnership, because they have now the opportunity to sell and market something that they hadn't had before. And we're doing that combined because we have the same objective. They want, net new jobs. They want good CapEx. They want, positive outcomes for that real estate and for the community, and we want a positive outcome for the real estate and the community. It's mutually beneficial. We just it's not public yet; it'll be public later this year. But the most recent one we completed in Pageland, which a lot of people said, "Why are you in Pageland? What do you?" We had tremendous activity on that building, and that deal's transacted, and the outcome there was phenomenal. It's again, can't disclose, but
sure.
It was a company that's going to have a very significant impact there all the way across the board. Jobs, wages, CapEx, utility, consumer, just all the way across the board. And that's, at the end of the day, we can't promise. We do have communities that want to have the ability to review and determine what their interest is in the company. But the outcome there in Pageland is what we would hope for on every deal. That's going to have a big impact. And again, that's not a promise or a representation we can make, but whenever you think about the vision for what the outcome is, I think that's a great example. And hopefully that'll be public later this year, and then we can talk about it.
Sounds like it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
In regards to obviously all of the upside, there's been tremendous focus obviously on industrial the last however long, 6-7 years as the economy recovered here. But in this space, this spec and build to suit, what are the biggest challenges from a developer's point of view? Like, what are the biggest obstacles for you? Not that it obviously makes it still a fantastic business, but every asset class has its challenges, whether that's going to be in the underwriting side, like we were talking about earlier, just how much the treasuries move can change the really the success of a deal. We've got, I don't even know what else could be the big variables for you, but heavily dependent on economic development, just the tax credits and the advantages they give you. So what are some of the things that make these two products or types of industrial products challenging?
Well, the incentive and those things, those are all for the tenants. So we're, if anything, a pass through. So the incentives don't really mean anything to us, and we're not site selectors. So, I mean, we're real estate developers. That's what we do. I mean, we've got experience in the public sector, but we're not site selectors. What keeps us up at night, if you will, for the past 2 years, I mean, you've seen costs escalate. And so trying to paper a build to suit or even spec in an environment where you're seeing monthly escalations to the extent that, used to be, you go back 4 or 5 years ago, you're working with a company, you got a budget from a GC, and that budget's good 60 days from the date that you get it. And it's not even a big deal. Today, it's funny, we procured a deal early last year, and one of the contractors that was a finalist brought in a spreadsheet. And within that spreadsheet, it had, by division, a breakdown of the duration and validity of that trade.
Wow.
And if you go, some of those bids were not valid the day they were submitted. Some of them were not valid 7 days. But if you went 21 days out, essentially 90% of that bid it was not valid. They wouldn't honor it. So that's the challenge, is how do you make a tenant comfortable with that? How do you, contract with a general construction partner for that? And then how do we paper that both with our lease and with our construction contract? Now, those days are, I'm not going to say they're over, but we have seen more consistency on that side. I mean, the lead, and the other part of that is it's not just cost, but then it was lead time, whether it's TPO, whether it's steel, now it's gear, it's been dock packages. So trying to solve for a schedule and, force majeure language has gotten very interesting in the last 2 years. But what's happening now is you've compounded some of those challenges, and the capital markets environment is really, really challenging to underwrite a deal. Given, I mean, you look like we were talking about, you've seen 160 bips spread on the 10-year in the past 6 months. Well, from the time you get awarded a deal, that doesn't mean you got the deal and you're standing still and you've got your financing in place, and you've got a lag there. So as volatile as it's been, that's been a real challenge. And you put both of those together. Now, again, you solve for it, you figure it out. There are creative ways to do it, and we've been able to have a lot of success even through this, some of these times that we've been in. The good part is, as you were talking about industrial, our deal flow, our volume is still extremely robust. And so from that side, that's encouraging. And it's been predominantly with manufacturers. That's where we continue to see very strong demand and strong activity. But it's not without its challenges. And I don't think they're going away. It's funny what the normal is, the new norm. Then the next day it's the new norm. And I don't think there is a normal now. And I don't think, whenever you return to whatever the definition of normal is, it's going to be something that you and I don't think it is today.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sure insurance costs do impact you significantly, but my question is, how do insurance, especially in this market, right? Well, maybe not as much up here, but coastal Southeast is obviously a very big challenge. How does that impact you penciling a deal from the development side, especially for industrial? A little bit different, maybe multifamily, because it's kind of baked into your NOI that you're going to be exiting soon. You guys might not be exiting some of these deals because you're holding them. So how does that impact you guys?
Well, with triple net deals, it's usually not. I mean, a lot of tenants will want us to quantify, and we'll go get quotes about blanket, but then within the box and any FF&E personal property, the tenant's got that. I mean, we've got to have coverage at full replacement cost for the four walls, if you will, the exterior, and then the negotiation on these leases is always who has what responsibilities from an ongoing maintenance standpoint. But most of these deals we're doing are triple net leases.
One thing I meant to ask earlier, so as far as philosophy of the business, you have developers that will develop something and then exit the deal quickly, right, and roll that capital into another deal. And then you obviously have the complete opposite end of the spectrum where they're just, developing the deal and keeping the cash flow forever. So what is Marlboro's focal point on that? Do you guys plan to exit these assets after a certain amount of times, or
there's no horizon?
Okay.
I mean, there's not anything that says we're underwriting this for a 3-year horizon or a 5-year horizon. I mean, we underwrite these deals for the base term and look at the upside and the downside. I mean, we have sold a couple properties over the last couple of years, more so because they've been with no intention of selling. Unsolicited offers that they say, this is the number, and we're like, what? Really? Now I think those days are gone. But you go back to 20 and 21, and I mean, it was so competitive that we did transact on deals that we had no intention of transacting on, simply because we were literally getting calls. It was crazy. Every week it was someone calling and saying, "Hey, we understand you're developing this. Is it for sale?" Well, no. Well, could we make an offer anyway? Sure. Mm-hmm. But those days are gone.
Yeah. The email inbox full of LOIs from people you don't know.
That's right.
Yeah. As those rates go up, it's interesting how it's a negative correlation to the phone ringing, it seems like. So parlaying that into how things are changing in this market, but how things are changing for you guys. You've made 2, it seems like, very good hires, right? Julie in 2021 and then Tom in 2022, which I think you mentioned them earlier. But what is the focal point for the company right now as far as growth? So Julie gets brought in to focus on, I think, North Carolina and Virginia, and then Tom has significant relationships in Georgia. So are we just spreading the wings here and continuing to expand?
Well, it is. That's the plan. But if you look at Julie and Tom, and I think I mentioned this earlier, bringing Julie on, we have had success in North Carolina. We've done work there, but from our standpoint, if you look at the allocation of time and resources and geographically where we are, we didn't feel like we were doing a good enough job with the team that we had. And nothing negative to anybody, myself, our whole team, because that we were all covering a larger area. But we felt like we needed to have a more consistent and sustained presence there. So that was the thought. Now, that had been thought about for some time. It just, the person was the key to make that go. And Julie, as I mentioned, I've known her for 15 years. We were friends. We worked together. We'd done development deals in Catawba County, so we'd worked with her on the ground. She was part of a great program. But the reason that we expanded to North Carolina was, one, there was a need, but more importantly than that, it was the right person. Yeah. And Tom is the same way. I mean, Tom, with his previous role, he was a huge ally to us, and we did a lot of work with the construction firm that he was with. And whenever he was making some changes, and he's such a good man and a genuine man, and he busts his tail. He came over and told us what was going on. He said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, I want to work for you guys." We said, "Okay." Wow. No, there we go. But it's people. If you look at our team and the way our team has grown, it's been done with needs that we've identified and taken the time to really understand what we need. Just like on our construction team, Michael, who I think you met whenever you came in. Michael's a PE, he's a civil engineer. He serves as a construction project manager, but he adds so much value to us in these dual purpose roles where he can add value on the front end. Jill, who I don't think you met here in our office, we had worked with her in her previous role. She's an architect, an AIA, and she adds, both value as well as support to Bill Keener, who leads our construction admin team. So these are, roles as we've grown, roles that we've tried to do very strategically to get, we're just like I mentioned earlier on economic development, and we're not a team that we get to have a siloed out. This is my job, and then I hand it to this person, and it's their job, and we all, and that's why we function so well. We all support each other from start to finish, and that's one of the things that I like about this. If we're outward facing and we're dealing with a prospect, the people that they meet day one are the same people they're going to be dealing with when the project's done, and then even 5 years later. And I think that's meant something to some people. There are no handoffs, and that's not a function of anything other than we vest ourselves in these deals, and everybody works on them from our team.
Well, it obviously significantly impacts just probably the quality of work that you guys do, but the performance in that it's not like someone's a new employee and we don't know Julie. It's you've known Julie for 15 years or whoever it may be. That's the basis points of that trust, compounding over time is significant because you know how these people are going to act in different environments. It seems like culture is a huge deal.
Well, it's a huge deal. And culture and the dynamics of our office. And like you said, we all know each other and we've worked together for a long time as a unit, and we function as a unit, and it's a family at the end of the day. Yeah. And that's, I think that's one of our greatest strengths is the relationships that we have with each other, right, but also the understanding and the support that we provide each other as a team and as a unit. And I just, you always want to enjoy the people that you're spending as much time with as you are your family. And that's what we have here. And we just have a really good dynamic with our team, and we have great support from our board and our leadership out of the headquarters. It's just been really encouraging for us all the way across the board. Yeah,
and rather unique for a lot of companies too to be unique. That fortunate, right? Before we kind of transition into like talking about another deal, I'm kind of curious about how did the Ascot Valley deal come together? Obviously, you and Sandy had been working together for a while, but was it announced this July? That's when all the articles are titled. That's when you guys announced construction began.
So it has been announced, and that's probably right. This process started probably a couple years before that press release went out, and it just like we outlined before. This was something that we, obviously think a lot of Sandy. We think a lot of the folks in Horry County, and we had success there. And so this started where I think Sandy saw a need. We had some discussions about it, and I give Horry County and the NBR EDC credit because they had controlling product. They had product there at Ascot Valley, and that's where it ultimately came to fruition. But it was just kind of the outline I gave earlier. Started with a conversation, and then does this make sense? Does it make sense economically from where we're going to be cost basis wise, et cetera? And it was a long time coming, and just update was, in the coastal counties, and I think you do some development, so you probably understand, going through the entitlement process with OCRM, that has taken us a little longer than we would expect, but hopefully we're moving dirt there by December.
Wow.
And completing in June or July. And Sandy has, we got a lot of activity on that building, and there's not a shovel been turned yet. So we're going to have a good outcome there.
So it's 100,000 square feet, slotted originally for Q3 of next year for delivery, and you're saying still on track for that. So it's on 22 and 701. Very cool. Yeah, that's going to be a nice.
Yeah, we've designed, procured, and awarded that. All we're waiting on now is our land disturbance permit from OCRM, but everything is done. With the exception of having the land entitlement to start going vertical.
It'll come. So. As far as deal questions, I know we chatted about this a little bit earlier, but is there any deal, development, acquisition, sale, leaseback that was significant in your career, complex, or any large deal story worth that you'd like to share?
Yeah, a few of those come to mind. One that we just finished down in Savannah, and it was done during, that was a deal we got awarded in September of 21. So we pursued that deal. It's a competitive deal. We were introduced to that deal by general contractor down there that we hadn't worked with before. Great general contractor. Wow. But we pursued that together as a team through September of 21, got awarded. It was the company, the tenant is CAE. They're based in Montreal. They're a very diversified company, but they're one of the world's leaders in flight simulation training. So they had partnered with Gulfstream. And we got awarded the deal, didn't know everything, but they had really, really high branding design standards. They had a firm in Montreal that was assisting them on design. So there was a transfer of that, but also this was a ground lease deal. So we came to find out, we knew that, but what we didn't know until after the fact is that they had already signed the ground lease about 2 years before. So we're about to commence a ground lease. We're trying to negotiate a building lease, and we're trying to figure out how in the world do we make these coterminous. Because so there was a lot of back and forth. Very, very challenging. That was as challenging on the development side as it probably was the real estate side, because the building, it's a 50,000 square foot building. half of that is an office, and then you're marrying in a 45 clear. You've got 2 sim bays because they literally manufacture the sims from the ground up, and so those are going in, and they're bringing in pilots from all over the world to train on those sims, and it's briefing rooms, training rooms. I mean, I'll show you some pictures.
Wow.
Beautiful facility, but we had a lot of challenges of just how do you figure that out on the front end. And then another one, I know you asked for one, but you talk about full circle. We did a project with Jabil Healthcare up in Hendersonville that we finished last year, and the site that we ended up doing that project on was a site, and I give Henderson County credit, the partnership up there, Brittany Brady's group. They had the foresight that they actually controlled this property publicly, the Economic Investment Fund, which is a part of that organization. Yep. But you talk full circle. So my first job in economic development, almost 20 years ago, the gentleman that owned that, his name was Mr. Garrison. It was the Garrison property. It was one of the people that I think everyone that worked in that organization had met with Mr. Garrison because he was considering that. So we met on that property where Jabil is now and talked to him about what he wanted to do with that site 20 years ago. And now it's an industrial park. Yeah, it's just really, really cool. And that was one that was personally really, really cool for me because being a part of that organization 20 years ago, a lot of those folks are still there on that board and still leading that and community and that organization. I don't know about that. I don't know about that, but it was a really, really cool project, just kind of going full circle.
That's wild. For the flight simulator deal, so that was built to suit. They contracted you. Yep. Okay, so they had already, CAE had already acquired the lot under a ground lease, you're saying?
So let me further complicate this.
This is crazy.
So the site was owned by the Airport Commission. So the Airport Commission had master leased the property to Gulfstream.
Oh.
The Gulfstream had subleased it to CAE, and then we had to figure out how to take assignment of the sublease and then essentially restructure that. And to give everyone credit, everyone cooperated to do that. But we ended up having to make modifications to that. And then, we're negotiating the building lease, the facility lease.
Leasing it back to
That's right.
CAE, right?
So we had a facility lease and a ground lease, and they had to speak to each other. And you've got 30 parties involved in trying to figure out how we're going to do this.
So you guys own the building.
That's right.
But obviously not the dirt, right?
Not the dirt.
Are those leases mapped up to the same
They are.
term? Okay.
They are, fortunately. Now, that was one of the big things we had to figure out because the term was about to commence before we had already started construction. So we had to amend it, and we figured it out. But, yes, those are now coterminous. So we've got a base term on the facility lease and then all the renewal options that extend out 45 years all align. So we would control the ground for that amount of time. They obviously are not leasing it. I wish for 45 years, but their term is much shorter than that.
That's a really cool deal.
Mm-hmm.
In wrapping up, so what's next for you guys? What are you guys focused on now? Obviously, we mentioned there's a slew, and I think everyone's experiencing it. Different market conditions right now, but you guys have been on a pretty good path and good clip the last couple of years. It seems like a lot of projects have come in. What are you, anything new you're focused on now, just next 12 months or so? Well, you said you got a bunch of projects.
Yeah, I mean, in the immediate term, we've got multiple spec buildings that they're not public yet, but those will be public in the not too distant future. I mean, we've got a build to suit that we're finishing design on that'll be procured out late this year that we hope to start construction on early this year. And we've got significant, all these deals, they go into a funnel. You start at the funnel and then things disappear, don't happen for whatever reason, but we've got a lot of activity at the end of the funnel. I mean, obviously one of our focuses is on getting the building in Florence, the spec there, occupied. That's a number one because that building, it's within our service territory. I mean, we didn't talk a lot about this, but where our headquarters is, we have a significant amount of land holdings up and down 95, really from where 20 and 95 come together in Darlington and Florence all the way up to Dillon because our parent company is the power provider there. So we're especially vested. I mean, we can work anywhere. We're not restricted territorially or jurisdictionally, but there is certainly an enhanced focus in the area because it's not just a real estate deal. It's a power deal, and it's an economic development and community deal as well. So getting that building occupied, it's across the interstate from our parent company's headquarters. So our leadership sees that building every day and want a tenant in there, and so do we.
Yeah, very cool. That's actually unique. Is there any, obviously you guys have a big focus on industrial, right, for the most part. Is there any other asset or business model? We talked about these 4 models that you have right now. Any other asset, business model, or market that you guys haven't been in that you have interest in doing or haven't done yet that you are attracted to?
I think our growth will continue to be somewhat organic in that, I mean, if you look at today where we've got opportunities in states that we're not in currently. And what that will mean long term, I think it depends on what the outcome is there. And then kind of like North Carolina, where if you build enough of a base and a portfolio, what does that mean? I still think that's going to be consistent here in the Southeast. I think if you look at our team and our experience, I think our focus is going to remain in the industrial sector and really in the manufacturing sector. That's where we really excel. We didn't talk a lot about Bill Keener, who leads our construction admin team, but he is a tremendous asset to us with his knowledge, and particularly in more intricate and complex manufacturing environments, or even CAE was a complicated deal.
Yeah.
But even Jabil, Jabil was 170,000 square feet with a 80,000 square foot ISO 8 clean room and really complicated MEP. So we're that's really we love spec. And we've been fortunate to have some manufacturers occupy our spec buildings, but the build-to-suit side, that's really where we excel, and that's really in large part to Bill and his experience and the rest of the team as well.
Wow. In wrapping up, is there anything we missed about Marlboro? You guys do so much, and you've had so much success in different areas, and you're growing really well. Like, is there any line of service or anything that you wanted to highlight about the company that we missed?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
We've been here almost 6 years, and we Brian and I laugh about it. Whenever we go to our board meetings, you leave and we just have so much support from our board and from William and from our leadership that you can't help but be motivated and want to meet expectations and help them be successful, because it all ultimately benefits our parent company. And so it's been a great almost 6 years, and hopefully we'll have a lot more ahead of us.
I got 2 more questions for you, actually. One I forgot from earlier. What is the biggest advantage of you, and it's highlighted actually on the website, is you not being investor owned, right? Like, what is the competitive advantage for you guys to be an industrial developer without that? Because it's highlighted somewhere where it's like competitive advantage of not being.
Well, for us, so
what does it allow you to do that other people have to be?
Well, we're not syndicating these deals.
Yeah.
We're not placing funds from pension funds or from institutional investors, and so
you're not raising money in any regard.
So from our standpoint, it allows us to be very entrepreneurial. So when we have an opportunity and we're underwriting an opportunity, we're making a decision. We're not using historical benchmarks to say this is what we've promised. It's a decision that's made in a room with 4 people.
Yep.
And of course the board has to approve everything, but it allows us to, there's nothing from a marker standpoint that says this is how we have to do this deal. It also allows us a lot of flexibility with how we structure those deals in ways that maybe are not as concerning to us as they are for others.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's fascinating. Who do you think along the way, right? You've had many different jobs, a couple different careers, sounds like all kind of under the same roof, but who was a mentor to you? Who helped you the most in your growth and or maybe learning and scaling your own skills?
In the private sector, I think that list is too long. Really, whenever I made the transition to the private sector, so many people helped me that didn't necessarily have to. Whenever I started and transitioned over, I would meet with anyone that would answer the phone, because we're trying to build something,
of course,
from the ground up. But really, I think I go back, the first couple of jobs I had, I was really young, right out of school, working with Scott Hamilton in Henderson County, who really, he's just such a genuine guy. I love Scott. Scott's, now a big time guy, But I cannot talk to him for 3 years and see him. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. It's like we hadn't talked in 5 minutes. I mean, he's just that kind of guy. So just observing him early in my career, and he's such a dynamic guy, and his personality and how engaging he is. And not just, I'm not talking nuts and bolts of public sector economic development, but just who they are as people. And then even in Florence, Joe King, Scott and Joe are very different guys, but Joe I learned a lot from. He operated with a sense of urgency. I mean, it was 15-minute callback requirements, and he used to have it started with 3 initials, the keys to success, and this was not project specific, but just how you operate. And it was the 3 Ds. It was drive, determination, and desire. And then he added an E, which was enthusiasm. And then by the time I left, there was a P on the end, which was persistence. So the keys to success were those 5 letters. I don't know what it is today, but I really did. I learned a lot from those 2 gentlemen, especially an impressionable young guy, just out of school, and those are things that I still think about. Scott always used to say, the ultimate life lesson is you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to be there. And I just think that's so applicable. It's something I've remembered since I was 22 years old that I think about periodically. So just things that you think about. But on the private side, I would be doing a disservice to try to list individuals because there were so many, and that continue.
That's fair.
To help us and to support us, which is at the end of the day, I used to tell people when I transitioned to the private sector, people only call me because they like me. And fortunately, a few people did, because we weren't, we didn't, at the time, there was no spec product. There was no land holdings. Yeah. It was really trying to find opportunities because with relationships.
Wow. I love it. I think that's a great place to wrap. Kyle, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure to join you today.
Yeah.